Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis, that over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturient Society.
Welcome back, writers, to your favorite podcast all about writing. And that over there is Karissa Harlow, your host, aka Catherine, aka Lewis. I'm Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien. And I feel like I'm just constantly giving you guys updates as to what I'm eating. Spoiler, I'm pregnant, so this is probably going to continue for like the next 6 months.
Oh gosh, I forgot you'd already told everyone that. I was like, Ash.
I know. Yes, everyone
know.
knows now. Or if you're new and this is your first episode, surprise, I am with child, and the child loves two things more than anything else in the whole world. Mac and cheese of any variety. It can be like the really cheap, gross stuff. You know, like sometimes like at fried chicken places, like you get mac and cheese, and it's like, you know, usually like the macaroni's overcooked, and I'm like, you know, it's the least. Nope, I don't care. It's all mac and
good.
cheese is good. And potato chips, sour potato chips. So like limon potato chips, salt and vinegar potato chips, chili limons. Yeah, literally any sour. I have some dill pickle flavor potato chips. And here's my complaint just to start off the episode. I don't know how to be healthy. I have never had cravings this strong. I tried to substitute the sour with anything else. But the other thing that I figured out is like a tortilla with cream cheese and some tahini. I think I've mentioned the tahini seasoning before. It's very sour. And then like some vegetables, right? Which sounds healthier than potato chips. But in reality, cream cheese, very calorie dense, very fattening. Flour tortillas, also very calorie dense and not good for you either. True. So it ends up being about the same, even though one has fresher ingredients. But that's the only substitute I found. So now I'm trying this thing where I eat sour candies and I just try to suck on them for a really long time. I've got trying to make the camera focus. My camera, whenever I use the green screen, hates to focus. So I'm eating these sour punch bites. Yeah. Nice. But it's not as satisfying because I don't crave the sugar. I was sucking on sour Jolly Ranchers earlier, and as soon as I'd get through like the sour stuff on the outside, I'd spit out the rest of the candy because I was like disgusting.
Like, I don't want this.
I don't want that. I just want the sour part.
Nice.
So Javi brought me home 3 bags of sour potato chips and then got like 6 things of sour candy. So nice. I'm at a loss. Usually I don't find it that difficult to eat well. I'm having a really hard time eating healthy.
I mean, here's the thing. As long as you like force down some vegetables every once in a while, I feel like you have the right to just like do what you want.
Right? I hope so. Yesterday I ate a bunch of veggies and I was so good. Today I had like a bunch of watermelon, which was good. I don't think I had any other vegetables, so I should just have some celery for dinner after this, since I ate the rest of a whole other bag of potato chips earlier today.
Nice.
So I've definitely eaten enough calories that my body is like more than fine if I just have celery for dinner. I have to remember that. I have celery for dinner, Ash. Anyways, so that's just a quick, completely unsolicited update on my life as a pregnant person. And also my mouth burns from eating sour stuff, but the baby doesn't care. The baby's like,
the baby can't feel it. So the baby's like sweet.
It's like
more sour, but not sweet.
I need more
like sour.
Sweet, but sour stuff only. Yeah. So that's what I'm struggling with, that and mac and cheese.
Interesting.
What? Avi just came out of the bathroom and he's making a face at me. He probably won't even show up in the camera because of the green screen. Yeah, he's standing like right behind me.
Heard you before I saw you.
Yeah, there was.
Nice.
That's not scary at all. But anyways, so he was a doll and he got me a bunch of sour food.
Nice.
Now, if only he gotten me some mac and cheese, that would have been the only thing he could have done better.
The like stereotype is that pregnant women like pickles. So maybe it's because of the like sour element.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I read this thing where it said like a lot of women have this like you get kind of this like metallic-y taste in their mouth, and that's the sour flavors mask that like perfectly. And I think that that's what it is mainly, to be honest, because I get that's like horrible flavor. So then even when I'm not hungry, I have this like ravenous urge to eat, even when I'm not ravenously hungry, which is often still, but like just because I want that flavor out of my mouth. It's a horrible flavor, and sour stuff is the only thing that makes it go away. So So I can only like last as long as it takes for that taste to come back. And then I'm like, well, I have to eat something again.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. It's very difficult. Anyways.
Have fun.
Yeah. How's your week been, Karissa?
Good. I decided kind of spur of the moment I was going to take a break from TikTok because I was just getting really anxious and like it was consuming too much of my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you guys want to follow us over there at the Scripturient Society, there's still videos up. You can do
there's
that.
Plenty of content,
checking,
you guys.
Yeah, like I'm checking for comments and that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, I even have like 40 drafts, but I'm like, I'm so exhausted by the thought of posting these. And so I'm just taking a break. I think it's been 10 days or so, and I feel much better. So
heck yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Love that for you.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, I'm eventually going to do it again, but it's been very nice to not care. And in a strange turn of events, TikTok has now been showing my stuff to a lot of people. So I'm like, this is kind of a win-win.
Feels like a cosmic reward a little bit for taking a break.
Yeah, exactly.
That is funny.
I've just been basking in that. And then my parents are back, so I'm no longer solely taking care of the puppies, which is kind of a relief. And I'm just like, I'll take like an hour away from them. And then I'm like, okay, I want to go see the puppies again. But like that hour is so important. Nice. Just to not have to like have them right next to me all the time.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. But
that is nice.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I have a job interview scheduled for next week, which I'm excited about.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Where can I ask about this job interview, or at least what's the job for?
It's an editing job at like it's like an accreditation firm or place or whatever. So
heck yeah. That's awesome. God, the elusive editing jobs. That's amazing. So it's next.
I found
what day
like
is it?
Tuesday. So I can update you guys next week. But I applied, I found like 3 or 4 editing jobs. And I was like, gosh, any of these would be amazing.
Yeah.
So I applied for all of them. And then I got the HR person got back to me like within a couple hours. And I was like, this is so encouraging. I'm so excited.
That's amazing.
I'm so ready to have a salary again. So
oh my gosh. Yeah. Yay. No, I bet. That's amazing. Freelance work is stressful because it's just
it's like TikTok. It's just constant work. You think to yourself before you start, you're like, I can do this. This is fine. But there's like no routine. It's just constant trying to get stuff done all the time.
Exactly. And it's like you have to put in so much work to research the jobs and bid on them. Like as a freelancer, then you don't get paid for all of that work that you do. And that's hours and hours.
Yes. So I'm ready to move past that. But we'll see.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I just sat on my own hand somehow and like tweaked my wrist.
Nice.
I was trying to tuck a blanket under my legs because I'm cold all the time.
Oh, weird. Is that a pregnancy thing or is it cold there? Because it's hot here.
I have read it's hot here too. Well, it's actually been very nice. It's like 76 outside, but inside it's also probably like 70 something, which is warm for inside usually. But I'm wearing the same sweater I've been wearing for weeks. So if you guys recognize it, it's because I'm wearing a different shirt underneath though, I promise. I put on a tank top today because I was like, I'm going to try. And I put on some of my maternity shorts because none of my other shorts or pants fit at all anymore. And so they're comfy and nice, but they do have the elastic waistband in the back, which is not attractive. And I don't care. I'm so comfortable.
Like I'm done with looking good.
Yeah. But the thing is, and then I immediately put a blanket around my legs. I had tucked around my legs all day and put on a sweater because I did read something that said like pregnant women can be like a couple degrees colder or feel a couple degrees colder because I guess we have something crazy like 50% or more like increased blood content when you're pregnant. So I guess because I'm warmer, I'm more sensitive to cold because my body is warmer, but ironically it also means that I overheat really fast if it gets hot.
It's kind of like having a fever. Like you feel cold, but you're actually warmer than everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what it's like. And in that same research, I learned that women on average can be up to 3 degrees colder than men. So women do get colder than men.
That makes so much sense. You know, like the dad stereotypes that dads are always like, keep the air conditioning low, like, you know, not going all the time. And then the women in the house are like, but we're so hot or cold or whatever. Like, it makes sense that men and women are different.
Exactly.
Sense, so.
Poppy gets so upset about it. He's like, and he walked in here like when he first got back and he was like, it is so hot. And I'm like, I'm wearing a sweater. Like, this is a heavy sweater. And I've got a fuzzy blanket tucked around my legs and I am perfectly comfortable. So no. Yeah. But, and he likes to be, he's particularly, I feel like, cold natured or whatever it is. I never know if it's like hot natured or cold natured. Yeah. Whatever it is. He likes to be cold. He likes for it to be like 67 degrees inside. And I'm like, that's physical torture. So
yeah. Why would you do that to yourself?
Right. I'm like, for me, the sweet spot's about 72 degrees inside. I feel like that's nice. It depends on the day too, because when it's really hot outside, 72, 73 inside feels nice and breezy. If it's, you know, because it's a nice and refreshing difference from the outside. And it's not been as hot outside yet as it's gonna be. What's it there right now?
80s. I think high 80s. So it's not as hot as it's going to be, but I'm always taken off guard by the change in temperature. I'm like, I was freezing a couple weeks ago. And then I just woke up one morning and I'm like, I'm hot. Weird. What do you do about that? And so I'm like still sleeping with blankets and not having fans on. And then my parents came back and turned on all the fans and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was an option. Cool.
Yes, exactly. It's the transition between seasons is really difficult. And Arizona and Texas, I think both have this thing where we kind of like, we have to flip flop a couple times before like we really get into the season. So we had like a week of almost 90 degrees and then it was like 60 degrees. And now, and then we flipped back again. And now it's like a week of it being like about 75 degrees. And so I'm just hoping we continue to get warmer from here because the going back and forth is very stressful for me.
It is. I never know how to dress or like if I should put my fan on before I go to bed, if like I'll be cold or hot in the morning. So I just want it to be firmly in the middle of a season. So I don't care which one.
Exactly what to expect. I agree. I have a hard time picking which season is my favorite these days because like living on the farm and stuff, like aesthetically fall is obviously my favorite season. I feel like that's true for many people, but practically I love every season because there's very important things that happen in every season. But where is I going with this? Oh my God.
You don't have a favorite season?
I don't have a favorit season, but there was something more relevant I was going to say. I just took us
I don't know.
Totally off course. I don't know what it was. So I'll just say I did pick my cute little tank top I got. I wanted to wear it today because I haven't gotten to wear it since I got it for like $5. It's got little yellow flowers all over it.
It's cute.
But it is a bit of a crop top, like a long crop top, but still a crop top.
Yeah.
And so I've been wearing my sweater all day that's like closed in the front so no one can tell, but it's not exactly cute because I have
you just got the baby bump outside.
Yeah. Like, that was the problem too, is almost all of my summer shirts, almost all of them are crop tops. I always have worn crop tops. So like, and these ones were short crop tops. And a lot of them I had just gotten for like a few dollars, but they were new and I hadn't gotten to wear them yet. So I literally put them in a box and put them away last week because I was like, well, I'm going to get
next year.
Yeah. So that's a bummer. So I ordered some because I don't really like a lot of maternity clothes. There's just, if anyone out there has ever tried to shop for maternity clothes, A, they're very expensive, and B, a lot of them are just not flattering or they're just boring. So I went on ThredUp and I got a bunch of used extra large t-shirts, like graphic tees that I liked. And I was like, this is what I'm wearing.
Yeah, this will be my pregnancy wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. So my pregnancy wardrobe that I have compiled is like 3 or 4 pairs of maternity shorts, 2 pairs of maternity jeans, and then a couple extra large button down shirts, but I like to leave them open over a tank top. So then I can like dress them up or down. And I can, they're also they're really like lightweight. So they're like really cool. And then my big oversized tees. And that's what I'll be living in until the baby comes.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. I have nothing else. I mean, I also have a couple like sundresses, but it's been in between weather. So I've not known if I can wear them or not.
Right.
This is my first day wearing shorts of the season too, and it was too cold, really. Yeah. Anyways, not that anybody asked for my clothing, seasonal, or eating updates, but that's what I'm living in.
That's Ash's life. for the foreseeable future.
It absolutely is. Anything else exciting happen in your world? Your parents are back.
They're back. Not much aside from that. So pretty laid back week, which is good.
Was church good? You said you went to church last week.
Yeah, it's really good. I don't know if I said this, we're on Wednesdays, we're in the book of Revelation. So
that's a fun one.
It's really cool. And it's like our church is like a verse by verse kind of thing. So my pastor just picks a book and we read through it. So it's not like a message based, it's like Bible based. And so we're literally just going through like chapter 1, chapter 2, and he's explaining all this stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's so cool. Like obviously there's a lot of stuff that you have to just say, hey, we don't know exactly, but this is kind of what we can assume. But he knows so much about like, you know, taking stuff from the Old Testament and then being able to say like these are referring to the same event and like here's how we can anticipate this to go. So it's really cool. So I like it.
That is crazy. That's speculative right there, which is very on theme for today's episode.
It is.
Well, do you have any book recs this episode?
I do. I'm so proud of myself. So it's called A Forgery of Roses. Am I gonna remember the author?
I love that title.
Jessica S. Olsen, I think.
Ooh.
It's too far away from my stupid eyes to be able to see exactly, but it's something like that.
My stupid.
I am very nearsighted.
That is a beautiful title.
It is. It's A Forgery of Roses, and it's about it's a standalone, and it's a fantasy. So like the magic system is that certain people called prodigies can paint like a portrait of something alive, like an animal or human, and then they can change the appearance of the subject through that. So like if you're missing an arm, they can paint you with an arm and your arm will come back. But she's like trying to keep it hidden because you know, danger.
Ooh, I love it.
It's very cool and a really unique magic system. It's like the perfect magic system for a standalone where it's like small enough that you feel satisfied at the end, but like interesting enough that it keeps you hooked for the whole book. So I liked it a lot.
I like that. You're very into magic systems too, so I trust your judgment.
I trust my judgment too. Not to toot my own horn, but
let's see. I don't have a book rec from something I've been reading this week. I'm still trying to finish Renegades. I got distracted with TV. And so, because I've been watching more TV, because Lent is over, because Easter has passed now.
Right.
And so my thing that I gave up was watching TV before bed, which sounds like a very little thing, but it actually was really good because now I'm in the habit of, for like, you know, a whole 40 days, instead before bed I would do this like Bible study thing, and so I finished that Bible study because it was an Easter based Bible study, and now I'm doing a new one that I started, but it was good. I do get to watch TV in bed now again, which is nice because it's part of how I decompress, but I have made it a habit of doing my Bible study first. So so that was good. But anyways, one of the shows I've been watching is based on a book, so I've not read the book. I'm gonna say that I haven't read the book, but the show is amazing, and it leads me to believe that the book is really good. It's again in the theme of this like thriller psychological mystery genre that I've been getting progressively more into. That and YA and NA are still those are my babies. But so it's called Safe by Harlan Coben.
Harlan Coben is amazing.
See?
Yes, I love him.
Go. So you got an author rec right there from Karissa. I'm saying that it's probably a good book because the series Safe, I'm like, if this is anything like the book, this is an excellent.
Is that the one with the guy from Dexter?
I don't know. I didn't watch Dexter.
Oh, let's see. Is it like it's the gated community and his daughter disappears? Yes. It's so
Have you
good.
Watched it?
Yeah.
Or read it?
I watched it. So
I have like
pretty good.
I have like an episode and a half left, and I am so excited about it. I love this genre that I've just recently been discovering.
All the twists
existed.
And turns.
Exactly. It's so twisty
cool.
and turny. So I have to assume that the book it's based on is also very, very good. So that's my book rec. And also, if anyone has read it, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Although I assume it's not too different from the series.
My parents have read a couple of his, I think. I don't know if they've read that one, but they really like him. So
yeah. It was weird because when I looked it up, all I saw was stuff for the show, and I was like, this is a book based on his book. And then I found it on his website. But Yeah, that one, the show is definitely more famous than his book.
I think he has a couple shows based on his books.
Does he? I'm not
so
surprised.
when you're done with it, you should look up more of them. I can't remember what they're called, but
because that's amazing.
Yeah,
totally my kind of vibe. And it's like a limited series, kind of like a standalone. So you're like, everything's gonna be like nice and resolved at the end. God, I hope. I'll be mad. I'll take back my rec if it's not. Oh, good.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's like I don't know, I guess they're called mini series or whatever, right? Because you don't have to like wait in anticipation of a second season and then find out there's not one, or that you have to wait a year and a half. So it's really nice.
Yeah, the Brits do this very nicely. It is another UK production. The Brits are very good at that for some reason. Like all those like the limited like thriller series I've watched that have been like British have been just beautiful. Excellent work.
Yep. They do a good job of that. Yeah. I think so the main guy in it was Dexter, and I think he has an English accent in the show. Right, but he doesn't in Dexter, so it's real jarring when you first listen.
And what is Dexter about again?
He's the serial killer of serial killers.
That's right.
So he's a psychopath, but he like kidnaps other psychopaths and kills them. So
that's right. Such a concept.
There's too much cursing in it, but I really like it other than that. So I mean, it's like an F-bomb every 30 seconds, but the killing is an interesting moral dilemma, right? So I enjoy that. But then
that's true. Yeah.
So
side note, have you tried the strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper?
No, but I got a coupon for it. Should I?
You should try it.
Interesting.
I think people either love it or hate it.
Okay.
I like
that seems about right with soda flavors. So
I had to really think. It's because it's sweeter than Dr. Pepper, but it's good. Anyways, that was not on topic. What's our word of the week?
Okay, I feel like I'm gonna butcher pronouncing this. Let's see. Sciamachy. Sciamachy. It's something where it's like the S and the SH sound. So Sciamachy, something like that. Anyway, SCIAMACHY. And this is sham fighting for exercise or practice, an argument or conflict with an imaginary opponent. So it reminds me of you, like how you used to like Krav Maga, like for fun and like just to, you know, practice or like just get energy out. Yeah. So that's Sciamachy.
Sciamachy.
Yeah.
I like it. That is interesting. I've never heard that. I'm trying to like think like, ooh, what's the origin? What does it remind me of? It doesn't remind me of any other words at all.
It's archaic. I didn't look up the etymology or anything, but it is an old word. But I mean, how many people do this now? Like you do like martial arts for fun, or you know,
kickboxing. Lots of people do kickboxing.
Yeah.
Just, like,
I would even think like an argument or conflict with an imaginary opponent could be like debate team or mock trial or something like that. Like people do this all the time, kind of like for fun, to test out arguments and moves and stuff. So was it more popular back, you know, like 100 years ago? Who knows? But apparently we don't use the word anymore, but we should.
It probably was because people were more bored.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
Self-defense was probably more important too, but I don't know. Not that it's not important now, but you know.
Very
anyway.
true. It's a Sciamachy. Sciamachy. It doesn't sound threatening, which I guess it's not inherently.
It's not supposed to be. Yeah. It's just practice
Sciamachy
for fun. Yeah.
I'm just like trying to think of a funny way to use it in a sentence, and I can't because
it's already a funny word.
It's already funny. Sciamachy. Do we want to get into the theme for this episode?
Yeah, we're going to talk about speculative fiction, which is my favorite genre. It's like an all-encompassing genre, so it's a lot of stuff packed in there.
Yes, there's a lot of genres included in speculative fiction.
Yeah, so I guess I wrote a bunch of types down, so I'm going to go over them, and then we can talk about them individually. Because, I don't know, speculative fiction is really... I think you can really broadly place it into 4 categories, which is fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian, and alternate history. And then there are a bunch of others, but they all kind of go under one of those umbrellas. So it's like, it's like a pyramid scheme of a genre.
Oh my God. Yes, it is.
But all of them are just kind of like, what if the world functioned in this different way, right? Like all stories are what if stories, or at least all fiction stories are, but speculative fiction is like, what if the world functioned in a certain different way than it does?
Yeah.
And we love that, obviously. So
obviously. Yeah. I read something that said, so here's the other thing too I've noticed about when people talk about speculative fiction. It's another one of those things where like some people have slightly different definitions of what speculative fiction is. Because I saw one definition that was basically the categories that you said, and that seems to be the most broadly used definition of speculative fiction. But if you want to be like really strict about it, I think speculative fiction is supposed to be only stories that fall within those genres that could conceivably in some chain of events occur. So
like sci-fi.
Yeah.
Instead of fantasy.
Yeah, instead of fantasy. However, most people would count fantasy as part of speculative fiction. So it depends who you're talking to. So that's just one of those things, like, just know when you're using that term that it's possible who you're talking to could be using like the more like technical definition of speculative fiction.
Right.
But it's not as common. So
yeah, I guess that makes sense. When I was looking it up, there was a guy at some point that like used it to refer to science fiction exclusively. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. I don't know why it would. I mean, obviously sci-fi is a category and like you're speculating about like future advancements maybe. And then apparently I don't know, I forget her name, but some woman described it as like in the 1960s as the genre that like dealt with feminism as like what if the world was, you know, I don't know, fair to the genders. And I was like, what a weird specific way to use it that it doesn't operate under anymore. So
yeah, interesting. That's very specific. Ray Bradbury's books are I think those are some good examples of speculative fiction in like the most traditional sense, because they are science fiction / dystopian. Some of them, I'm thinking specifically Fahrenheit 451 here. But they're not like extraordinarily sci-fi or dystopian, or maybe they were.
You could see them happening.
Yeah, true. And then it did end up. A lot of the things in that book did end up happening. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? By Philip K. Dick, also, which is the concept for the movie Blade Runner. It was inspired by that one. But same kind of thing, where it does technically fall in the science fiction category, but I would also call it, even by the technical definition, I would call those examples like most traditionally technically speculative fiction, because they were like, the world could easily develop in this way or that way. And then the world did in certain ways.
I feel like you tend to be a little too right when you go for realistic speculative fiction. And then like 50 years later, you're like, wow, really hoped this would stay fiction. But
yeah, I know. The Hunger Games District 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's not lie. We all see what happens at the red carpet. And that the crazy fashion trends for celebrities and rich people, that District 1 fashion, that alone, I don't care who you are. I think you should be able to admit that even by the technical definition, Hunger Games does count as speculative fiction. I think dystopian books in general do. But that one is just, I mean, that was a very accurate one.
I know.
Dystopian books are pretty much always. Yeah, she is. She did good.
She really pinned down like American culture.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's deeply horrifying, which is often another trademark of speculative fiction.
Exactly. So let's get into the specifics. And I also feel like the term speculative fiction is sometimes a catch-all term if you're not sure which category your book falls into. Because, there's like science fiction and fantasy combined, or like any of these combined. And so sometimes speculative fiction is a good broad term for that. But if you can go specific, you should, especially if you're talking about marketing or querying. So just up front, I'm going to say that. So first genre is fantasy, which we love. Don't we all love it?
Probably my favorite.
Yeah.
Probably fantasy, then sci-fi for me, and then my thriller mysteries.
Fair enough. Yeah. That's a good hierarchy. So fantasy, of course, is a story that has some kind of supernatural or magical element. I assume you agree.
Yes.
No. I was going to keep talking and I'm like, wait, should I leave room for her to debate this?
No, I feel like that's pretty undebatable.
Yeah. So I also want to talk about the difference between like high and low fantasy, because I think sometimes people get confused about it, especially if you are querying or marketing. So this has been my understanding. High fantasy is a fantasy story that takes place in a world that is completely separate from our own, right? So Lord of the Rings would be a fantasy. Game of Thrones would be a high fantasy.
Wheel of Time,
low fantasy,
which has recently become a show.
Yes. Low fantasy is basically synonymous with urban fantasy, which means that it takes place like within the real world in some facet. So like the Mortal Instruments series or any of Cassandra Clare's. Harry Potter would technically be low fantasy because the real world exists, but the magic is like the main focus of
within
the story.
That world. Yeah
exactly. And then kind of in the middle ground you have like portal fantasy, so like Chronicles of Narnia, where the real world exists but the story takes place in a world separate from that. So like it exists, but it's not really a focal point. You don't stay there for very long. You go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if you're, because sometimes people have, blurred lines on where they're gonna categorize these things. So if you're looking at agent pages or you're trying to figure out how to categorize your book, and they say they represent urban fantasy but not high fantasy, that's really the difference. And where do you go if you have portal fantasy like mine is? I don't know. Sometimes you just err on the side of whichever one they represent or whichever one you feel best matches the story at that moment.
Yeah.
So because portal fantasy is kind of like middle fantasy, but like not all the time. Like some stories take place more in the real world or more in the other worlds.
That one's tricky.
So I don't know.
Fall into either category. Yeah. I think it's worth sending, probably, if you feel that the rest of your story matches what an agent is looking for. Probably worth sending either way. And also I think people use the phrase epic fantasy, often referring to high fantasy as well. True. Which epic fantasy, and I don't think that's incorrect. I do that myself as well. Although technically a high fantasy and epic fantasy don't have to be the same thing. They usually are. The epic fantasy takes place in another world separate from our own reality. And it usually occurs over a period of time, like a long journey, like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, Aragon. These are all epic fantasies. Most high fantasies are epic fantasies. So that's not necessarily, you could have a high fantasy that's not an epic fantasy, but also people use those terms interchangeably. So just another fun fact about terminology when you're talking about books.
Publishing is so fun because it's like you'll read an agent bio or like a publisher thing and you're like, well, are you adhering to the strict definition or like the colloquial definition?
It's like,
and there's no way to tell.
No, there's not. It's very stressful.
Super fun. But also paranormal, I don't know. I'm going to kind of get into this when we talk about magical realism, but paranormal is kind of like low fantasy as well. It usually takes place in like the quote real world. I feel like paranormal often has a romantic element, but it doesn't have to.
It does often, or it falls into like I've found a lot of thrillers and mysteries lately that are also paranormal. But I do think that paranormal is typically paired with horror, mystery, or romance. It's not usually completely by itself. It doesn't really quite have enough to grab people just completely by itself.
So the next one is I've started seeing this pop up probably over the past couple of years since I've been on social media for the podcast, which is non-magical fantasy. And at first when I started seeing this, I was like, this is stupid. That's not a thing. That's contradictory. Like that's what fantasy is.
I need an example of this.
I know. So what non-magical fantasy is the world is completely separate from our own, but no magic exists. And I can't really give you any good examples of this. I feel like it's a very indie genre right now. And I haven't necessarily read anything. The closest thing I can think of is Fable by Adrienne Young, though there is a little bit of magic in it. But if you take like the first half of the first book, that kind of style is like a non-magical fantasy. So like the world is complete, like a story taking place in Middle Earth with humans, but like there are no elves and there's no magic going on. It's just in a completely separate universe. So you can kind of design like the landscape and the government and I don't know.
I think I actually have a book idea kind of like this. I just never knew that there was a term for this.
I've heard it kind of thrown around a lot. Yeah. And so I do think that it could be good to make this distinction because if you advertise something as fantasy, most people want there to be magic because that's what they assume. And so the people that are going to be drawn in by that are people that want magic. And if there's no magic, that's going to be a real disappointment.
A huge letdown.
Yeah. So categorizing it as non-magical fantasy actually really works. Like I said, I think it's a relatively developing genre. I can't think of a ton of examples. So I don't know. I mean, definitely weird to query right now, but maybe in the next couple of years it will become a thing like new adults. So something to keep on your radar, and maybe try to find some stuff in that genre to read and see if maybe you want to participate in that or check it out. So
makes sense.
I wish I had examples for you, but I don't.
I could give you guys an example of my book that I have not finished writing, but I will not, because it will not be helpful to you.
You will have no idea what we are talking about.
I think that some books that end up being dystopian, I think that they actually could fall into that category. I think that like that's what I'm having with this book, because I could easily make it so that the world's history like used to be, you know, North America, and then, you know, the end of the world or whatever happened, and we've rebuilt society and it's unrecognizable. Or I could just set it in completely a different world, that no magic or anything, just another version of our world that or not even a version of this world, just another world, which is what I think I'm leaning towards, because that's kind of what it naturally happens. So it's also possible, if you guys are like writing something and you're not sure if it's dystopian or not, maybe it doesn't have to be a dystopian, maybe it's a non-magical fantasy. It exists. I think that some people just like, because we're used to seeing that in dystopian, I think that there's a lot of shared similarities between the two.
Yeah, for sure. So the next one is sci-fi, which we already kind of talked a little bit about and is more obvious, but I would describe sci-fi as a speculative fiction with extensions on the natural world. So I know that when I say sci-fi, most people are thinking like space operas, but it doesn't have to take place in space. Jules Verne, I think he did like, you know, under the ocean and in caves. I might be confusing some authors there, but you know, the idea of exploring, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Was that Verne?
Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, so that would be science fiction, right? Because it's exploring the natural world. Obviously, I don't think there's anything actually at the center of the Earth, but it's a speculative fiction. So it kind of talks about that.
Technical and scientific advances, which also means advances in our understanding of nature. But I agree. I mean, Jurassic Park is sci-fi because it comes from you know, they've learned more about, you know, dinosaurs and how to clone them. DNA and stuff.
Anything having to do with like genetic tampering or cloning.
Godzilla, King Kong.
There's what's it called? The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd, I think is what it's called. They're retellings on some horror stories. So the first one is the Island of Dr. Moreau. And then one is Frankenstein, and the other is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And all of those really are in and of themselves sci-fi to a certain degree, Frankenstein especially. But then any kind of retellings of those types of stories as well would probably categorize. So. Yeah.
I agree.
So sci-fi. And then I've heard people put dystopia as a subset of sci-fi sometimes, which it can be, but I don't think it has to be.
But it doesn't have to be. Yeah, totally agree.
So dystopia would be like, I don't know, I really associate dystopia with an alternate corrupt government. It doesn't have to be in the future. I know a lot of people go the future route because you don't have to deal with like historical reality.
Which is quite nice.
But you can go to the past or like the very near future in a certain region of the world or whatever. So obviously dystopia would include things like Hunger Games, the classic 1984, just concerningly accurate, The Giver, anything along those lines. So there's also
451, also dystopian.
There is technically the genre of utopian as well, but I never really know what to do with this one because utopia is a good world. I mean, it's if there's nothing wrong, I don't know what you do story-wise with it. So, but it's an option. If you can think of something to create conflict in a utopia, that would also work. So
that's hard. I mean, here, try this concept on for size. I had a book. I had like 7 or 8 chapters written of that was essentially essentially took place on another planet, right?
Mhm.
And it was a utopian society. And I hadn't
Okay.
fully fleshed out the conflict of the story, but just based on that concept, I mean, would that count as utopian, or would it be science fiction, or would it be both?
I think it would be probably both, because like I said, speculative fiction can really encompass multiple of the
Genres.
subgenres.
Interesting.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. An alternate planet. It's kind of like so C.S. Lewis wrote the Space Trilogy, which I think is super underrated, and you guys should read it if you like sci-fi. And the first book takes place on Venus, where the main character travels to Venus, and it's like a pre-fall with a capital F world. So there's like an Adam and Eve, but they haven't fallen. So everything is like basically perfect. And the conflict comes from the main character trying to convince the Eve character not to fall because she's tempted, and he's trying to prevent her because he's like, you have no idea what's going to happen if you do this. Please don't. So there is that type of a story idea, where maybe it's a utopia on the verge of collapsing, but something prevents that from happening. But yeah, the alternate planet thing is kind of an interesting way to do that, because then you don't have to deal with like the natural laws of Earth.
Yeah, you can just like pick different. The hell is the cat? Poppy walked up to me. He's holding the cat, and she's got her back legs. He's holding like her baby. Her back legs are stuck completely straight up in the air, no bend of the knees. Her toes are spread like a psycho. What is up? She looks like she's having a stroke, but she's just like enjoying herself getting pets.
Nice.
She's been very clingy today. She spent hours on my lap. Oh my goodness. She's looking at her father directly in the face. They're best friends. Anyways, a very cute moment happening over here.
We can't see it because of your green screen.
Yeah, unfortunately. You guys didn't get to witness it, but it happened. I promise.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, the alternate planet idea is cool. So
yes,
that would be kind of an interesting thing.
It's
the
great.
problem
it's a lot
with
of work around.
It is, but it's also because like when C.S. Lewis wrote his, there really wasn't a lot of knowledge about the other planets. So like they're very scientifically inaccurate based on what we know now. So I think, you're kind of restrained almost by what we do know. But you could do another planet, another solar system.
Planet. Yeah, if we just pick an unknown planet though. Or if you just say screw it and you do some non-magical fantasy, you can do that as well.
Exactly.
I mean,
it's a good workaround. I mean, I see why this is it seems to be at least a growing genre, because I think there's that desire. Like, we don't necessarily want magic, but we don't really want to be contained in the real world. So
yep, totally agree.
So the next genre is alternate history. And I feel like this one is super underrated. So the only example I can really come up with that I know of is Man in High Castle on Amazon. And so alternate history is like if something that did historically happen went a different direction. So like if Hitler won World War II, which is what Man in High Castle is about. Or if, any kind of war, if the other side won, or if like some kind of a scientific or technological discovery had come about earlier or hadn't happened at all. Something like that. And I don't know a lot of stories like this. And I feel like
it's one of my favorite concepts. Like as a thought experiment, this is like
very
easily one of the most interesting ones of all time.
Yeah, I feel like you would have to have somewhat of a working knowledge of history. So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe historians just don't write fiction very much, but they should, because it would be cool.
Because Ken was a huge history buff. I feel like she could totally nail this. But you're right. I do think because to create a logical story where you have like that is based on history, but you take out a key element of history, you have to understand how that was all interconnected before that thing happened, after that thing happened, so that you can accurately say what would change if it didn't happen. And that is just such an immense amount of knowledge, because when you do like an alternate history, people will expect the parts that actually happened in history to be accurate. You can't really get away with them not being. So maybe people are either intimidated to do it, or it's just not in their wheelhouse as much.
Yeah. Well, and as a reader, at least in the first wave of the stories like this, you would have to have a certain suspension of disbelief where you allow for some anomalies, right? So like in The Big Bang Theory, in one of the earlier seasons, like Sheldon and Amy are talking about, they're playing this game of like what if or something, and they say like what food item or something wouldn't exist if this group had won this war, and they get to like the Danish. And they like go on this whole thing about how like, well, if these people had won the war, then this place would have been flooded and the Danes wouldn't have created this pastry. And Leonard's like, what are you talking about? And like, it makes sense, but it's not the kind of thing you would assume or really focus in on when there's all of these bigger things. And so with alternate history, you have to have some idea of the details. And as a reader, you're just gonna have to like let some things go, right? Like, yes, if something happened in the 1500s differently, would the Industrial Revolution have happened at the same time? Probably not, but you can suspend your disbelief if the author is going to operate as though it did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you are taking a lot of liberties, but there is going to be a certain threshold of like, what can readers tolerate and what seems too unbelievable. So again, it might just be a really daunting idea.
Yeah, and it's true for speculative fiction as a whole that's true. But I think that readers have to more intentionally like set their suspension of disbelief a little bit higher for an alternate history story. And it is a lot more legwork as the writer when you're doing that. But I agree. I want to see more of this genre. I don't think we can get enough of this genre. I can't believe this genre doesn't exist. There are a lot of crossovers to it, largely a lot of the ones that like the Clockwork Angel series, right? That are historical, quote unquote, but also, other magical stuff is happening. And that's true. The Stalking the Jack the Ripper series also. Actually, that one is more of a historical.
It is. It's kind of alternate history because it equates
history,
like serial killers and like mythology in ways that aren't necessarily true, but it's operating as though they are true. So
I think that counts. And if there's no like magical elements, there's not any fantasy elements, at least there weren't in the first book. So I think that that's actually a pretty solid example of an alternate history. Although it's not the kind that I would typically think of, which is where you like take like a big thing that happened and say it didn't happen or add something that didn't happen in. But Clockwork Angel, what is it called? I want to say the Rainy Day Society.
Like Outlander.
Outlander.
Anything time travel wise is probably going to do that.
It's probably going to do it. Exactly. And it's hard because that also falls under fantasy, like for sure. And I don't think that alternate histories have to. I think people are just more concerned because if you do a fantasy and you do something inaccurate, people don't care as much because the suspension of disbelief is automatically there because you're reading a fantasy and you know it. You're like, if I'm going to believe that like gnomes and elves and fairies exist, then I'm not going to care about historical accuracy. But with just like straight on alternate histories, you want some accuracy. Like at the end of the Stalking the Jack the Ripper book, the author like wrote about like the actual victims and then any anachronisms from the story that she had put in there intentionally. She explained why she did them and stuff. And that was really useful. So maybe that's kind of the way to approach an alternate history if you're really concerned about, an inaccuracy accidentally writing it or because you need it to happen for the story. Maybe you include that at the end of the book where you say, here's how I wrote it for the sake of the story. Historically, this is actually what happened. Because that was just cool to see. But maybe if that's your concern, maybe that's a way to approach it. Because I would like to see more. I don't necessarily need that stuff at the end. It's super fun to have though. I mean, it was cool. It was cool to know that the author had done all of this really intense research though.
Yeah, I think too, possibly in this category is anything involving like a multiverse or a like jumping between different universes, because I'm thinking specifically about 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. And it's a trilogy and I really like this, so you guys should read it if you haven't. But
bonus book rec.
Small spoiler. So the main character starts out in this world and her parents like invent a way to get to like other universes, right? And you can only jump into the body of yourself from another universe. So she's living like her own life if XYZ had been different in the past, sometimes really recently in the past, sometimes really distantly in the past. And it's really cool because I think it's in book 2, you start getting these little hints that the main character that is not actually from our universe. So there are these little details. I think she uses Beatles songs a lot. So like, we all live in a yellow submarine. In other universes, it'll be we all live in a purple submarine or something like that. What? And there'll be like song titles, and she'll talk about them, and you'll be like, wait a minute, that's not the real song title. Is this person that we've been following from an alternate universe? And that's really cool. Obviously, there's,
oh my gosh,
there's some sci-fi elements there, obviously, but it kind of functions as an alternate history because there's one version of herself that she goes into in which the Empire of Russia never fell, and she is Russian, so she's like the Tsarina or whatever that the word princess is in Russia. And so it's kind of this alternate history for her. And in that instance, you don't have to go into it for too long. I think she's only there for maybe half a book, and then she's jumping to other universes as well, which is just really fun from an author perspective because you can go as deep or as shallow as you want. So maybe some kind of multiverse idea is also potentially alternate history, where you get to explore like, well, what if this hadn't happened, or if this had happened? And I think that could be
alternate history in sci-fi if it's a technological advancement that allows for like the portal jumping or for the universe jumping, or it could be a fantasy if it's a magical element that lets you do that, which is again because it's speculative fiction, because it's a crossover between two kind of wild genres.
Exactly. So yeah, if anyone out there is like, I have this idea for alternate history, but I don't know if I want to write it, please do. The market is not saturated. Your issue is not going to be like competition. It's just going to be getting people interested. And I don't think it would be that hard.
I don't think it would either. Automatically, you're going to have more people interested because in any other genre, basically, you're trying to get people interested and you're trying to fight off the competition.
Just eliminate one of those for yourself and you'll be good.
Go for it and write some alternate history. You want to. Then this is true for time travel also. I mean, I think that probably crosses over a lot as well with the sci-fi fantasy or multiverse hopping, all that good stuff. And I think it's underdone, so I would love to see more. I feel like TV does it a lot, but I would like to see it in books because I just think books tend to have more depth about the details, which I like. So absolutely. I completely agree.
All right. Next category is I had MIHC, and I was like, what the heck is that? It was Man in High Castle that I wanted to mention for that one. Anyway, the next category is magical realism. So technically speaking, I think this goes under fantasy. But the difference is that magical realism has basically one, maybe two, but usually one element of magic in the otherwise totally real world, right? So I think the Metamorphosis counts by Kafka, or he turns into the giant bug. And
Alice Hoffman. Pretty much anything written by Alice Hoffman and that whole genre of books. So Alice Hoffman wrote the Practical Magic series as well as other books, but she's kind of a queen of magical realism. And there's a whole, what is her name? There's another author that really reminds me of her, but writes a lot of stuff like that. The Good Witch on Netflix, if you've watched The Good Witch, is magical realism. And I think one of the most defining factors of magical realism is that typically, there's only one or two kind of magical or fantasy elements, but most importantly, the author never officially says, hey, this is a magical thing that's happening. Like you can kind of see the evidence before you, but you could, if you still wanted to be a hardcore skeptic and say nothing magical is happening, you could make that argument. Most people who are reading the book are going to go, ooh, this feels kind of magical. But, and like there is evidence that it's magical.
Natural.
Yeah, but it could be natural. Exactly. And that's the Practical Magic series. Again, like the whole series of books is a great example of that, because, they're doing like this, like traditional, like witchcrafty type stuff, it's not as scary or dark as it sounds. It's Alice Hoffman. But anyways, you could be like, oh, well, that's just like natural herbal remedies or people believing that it works. Or you could choose to believe that there is like an actual magical element to it. I think magical realism, you can read it with suspension of disbelief or without suspension of disbelief and still enjoy it either way. which is interesting because that's not true of any other subgenre of fantasy. You have to choose to suspend your disbelief.
True.
Magical realism, you don't have to. And it's kind of fun because even if you are a hardcore skeptic, and I think in real life I am kind of a hardcore skeptic, there's the little part of your brain that goes, but what if this was true? And it's just like a hint of magic enough, or a hint of whatever it is enough that you're like, not only am I going to maybe believe it's true in this book, but what if this could actually be true in real life? Which is the power of magical realism, is it's so subtle that it feels like it could actually be reality.
Right. Yeah. And it's like magical realism, right? So that element of magic should feel really grounded in reality in some way. So like you're saying, you could think it's magic. You could also think it's just a coincidence or something natural or something along those lines. But it has
someone who's just really intuitive.
Element.
That's basically in The Good Witch, it's called The Good Witch. And so the whole idea is this family has like this long history, and all of the women have been, somewhat powerful in some way or other, and that they have this like sixth sense and they're really good at natural healing. But that could just be that they're intuitive people with a gift for natural like healing remedies. Right. And that's what, of course, all the townspeople think. But then it always makes you wonder every now and then, like their intuition is just quite good enough that you're like, it feels a little bit more than natural. And you're like, magic? I wonder. And of course they play, because it's a show, they play like the magical music in the background. So you're like, ooh, was that magic? Or are they just like really smart, They're
just messing with us.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun. I have noticed middle-aged women and older really enjoy this genre also. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But they do. Fair. It's very aesthetic typically as well. The genre is typically very aesthetically pleasing. I think that some hallmarks of the genre too is it's typically more about the emotional journey that the characters take than some like really exciting plot. It's definitely, they tend to be a lot more character driven because you don't have this like huge end of the world plot going on. Yeah, exactly. You don't have a big world. It tends to be a much smaller focus. The drama tends to be related to like one person or their family or friend units. It's just like a much narrower focus because you're focusing on a person and their journey, and the magical realism either affects them or is as a result of that person and their actions, hypothetically,
right.
Yeah, it is a very weird genre. It's very niche.
It's hard to pin down.
Yeah,
because it could be one way or the other, and that's the point. So
and there's books you could go, that's not magical realism, that's just I don't even know what you call it, that's just chick lit. And a lot of chick lit actually falls into that category of magical realism. So
it does.
Yeah,
we should branch that out. There's no reason that would only be like chick lit. But I mean, it's great.
You can do so much with magical realism. Yeah. The problem, I think, is that magical realism relies completely on subtlety. So I do think you have to be like extraordinarily intentional and like kind of a bit of a master of the craft to really pull off magical realism. I think Alice Hoffman. Yeah, she does what she does better than anyone does it. It's kind of the only thing I've seen her do that she does like this. But she really understands it. Most people don't. I would struggle really, really hard with this. I don't. The balance is so hard and so specific.
Well,
it's like
and
chemistry.
You can have, you can have so many different interpretations on the part of the readers. And I do think that as authors, generally speaking, that bothers us. It bothers me where I'm like, I need you to know what's going on. I need you to have like the quote right perspective on what's happening here. But magical realism requires that you kind of leave it up to them to decide. Yeah. So
exactly.
I think this would count. So A World Without You by Beth Rebus is one of, I don't know, it's one of my favorite like more contemporary young adult books, but I think it counts as magical realism. So I think I've talked about it before. It's this kid and he's at this facility and he thinks that it's like an X-Men, like they're training them to use superpowers, but it's actually like a mental health facility. So they each have like quote gift. He thinks it's a magical power, but it's actually like a mental health thing. So like there's a girl and he thinks she turns invisible, but she actually has depression. And someone that's a like pyromaniac, but he thinks that he just has a fire power, right?
Yeah.
And for the whole book, you're like, okay, this guy like he's kind of deluded. That's why he's there. He needs help and all that kind of stuff. But then at the end, there's this little thing where I don't want to spoil it too much, but essentially he has to get out of this locked room and he like pulls this key with his quote magical power to help him escape. And when he gets out, he's kind of sitting, because he's kind of come to the realization like, okay, I'm just unwell, I don't have a magical power, right? But he's sitting there and he's like, how did I get that key if I didn't have a magical power?
And that's
you're sitting
realism.
there as the reader, and you're like,
so good.
I don't know, how did he get the key if it wasn't a magical power? And I remember reading that and just being so enamored of it. I was like, this is the coolest twist ever, because I can choose to believe that he has a magical power or that he doesn't, and it's just really cool.
I'd actually say ghost stories sometimes do this. Not all of them. If it's like a horror ghost story, it's usually pretty firmly paranormal. But like the paranormal investigation stories that are fiction, they often have this element. If basically at the end you find out that like there were no ghosts, it was, the result of human stuff all along, usually
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway, go on.
I'm just picturing them taking off the mask. But often you will see at the end of those books, there's like, I just read one recently. I think it was by Liza Powell. I don't want to be wrong because I don't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up. And it was really, really good. But basically this girl, as she inherits this house, and like her whole family's got like a bunch of like family secrets and mysteries and stuff. And then the story is that this house is haunted. And by all indications, the house is absolutely haunted. And then it's in a crazy story. It's wild. But basically she ends up figuring out, being able to like explain all of the like hauntings, all like the things that are happening by like normal human means. And so you're completely convinced, after being completely convinced earlier in the book, even me, a firm skeptic, that I was like, it's 100% haunted, 100% this is haunted. And then by the end of the book, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it wasn't haunted. I really thought it was haunted. But then at the very, very end, this crazy thing happens. And for a split second, you're like, did we just see a real ghost? And it just leaves it. And that's a great, I mean, that there makes it magical realism too, because it can make you go, if there was ever any little unexplained thing in the story, you go, was that a part of that? Wait a minute. Is that? So that's also call
everything into question.
Exactly. So magical realism is also great for crossing over into other genres too, especially the more quote unquote contemporary genres. That's the whole idea with magical realism, is that you take something from a contemporary genre like mystery, paranormal. Well, paranormal does not always contemporary, but it can be. Even chick lit, all that kind of stuff. And you make it a little bit like something else. You make it a little more interesting, which I think is also great, because then you appeal to twice the amount of audience. Or at least like 1.5 the amount of audience,
more than you would have otherwise.
More than you would have. And it's just, it's interesting. And it keeps the door open to like believing in, the unseen or the impossible. Or it's fun for the imagination. I guess probably not everyone would like it, but I sure like it. And if you're looking for something to give your story a little extra zest, and it's in a contemporary genre, maybe you need some magical realism in there. I think it's underdone. I think it could be utilized a lot more.
I think it's also, whether you like contemporary or like the harder speculative stuff like fantasy, magical realism is kind of like a nice palate cleanser between a lot of books that you're reading. So if you're all in contemporary and then you get a book with magical realism, you kind of like get the magic back into reading. But if you're always in fantasy, it's kind of nice every once in a while to read something that has that magical element that you like, but it isn't as hard or intense, I guess. And so you kind of have a little bit of a break, but it's still a good story. So.
I agree. It is an excellent palate cleanser between the genres, between like the fantastical, between speculative and contemporary genres.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it bridges that gap perfectly. Yeah.
All right. So next one is horror, which we talked about a little bit. I think horror tends to fall into the other categories as well. Which is why, again, I didn't list it as like one of the big 4 categories. So like you can have something like Frankenstein, which is technically horror, but it's basically also sci-fi.
Yeah.
You can have a ghost story that's horror, but it's also kind of fantasy. You can
Dracula,
have, I guess, any kind of monster story. I mean, it's kind of fantasy, but I also think just like slasher movies where the bad guy like keeps coming back to life and is like really hard to kill, like that's kind of supernatural. That's not 100%. Something that happens in real life. So
nope, supernatural for sure. 100%. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's necessary. Maybe that's magical realism. Who knows? But it's some kind of fantastical element.
I think most horror does. I think if it's like just like a horror that's like, based on a completely human-like, completely killable serial killer or something, I don't think that's speculative fiction, but I think all of the other types of horror are. So I do think there is a subset of horror that is not speculative, but I think almost all of it is speculative.
Yeah, I agree. And so obviously the point of horror is to scare in some way. So really, I guess if you're operating in any of the other speculative fiction genres or in the more contemporary vein, but the purpose is to scare people, I guess that would be the horror genre. I don't know. I don't read a lot in horror and I don't write in it. So I'm not sure how people within that category would want to describe it.
I started reading a little bit, mostly because Dean Koontz. Have you read Dean Koontz? He's one of my husband's favorite authors. Yeah. Okay. And I have started reading 2 of his books, have not finished them. I have not decided not to finish them. I want to finish them, but they're very intense. Yeah. They're horror books and I really want to read them. But I started both of them when Javi was gone and I was completely by myself. And I was like, what an interesting decision I have made to do that. Yeah. So I've not finished them yet. But I mean, I'm like a few chapters in and the writing is incredible. So I feel very confident recommending Dean Koontz as a good example of horror, of the horror genre. But I don't know where I was going with that at all. Like but he's a good example.
He's a good example. Yeah.
He's a good example. And that's pretty much been my experience with the horror genre. I don't typically read horror. My mom and brother did for a while, which is kind of wild.
Interesting. But especially doesn't seem like the kind of
my mom read Christian horror. And before you all laugh about that, Ted Dekker. And who is it? There's 2. There's 2 really big, and you guys can all laugh your ass off out there. I understand because I laughed my ass off until I tried to read one of them and I was like, oh, absolutely not.
Get this away from me.
I am not reading this. So Ted Dekker, and then I forget, there's another author. There's 2. I didn't realize
he was horror. That's so interesting.
Horror. And not everything he's written is horror, but he has written a lot of horror. And I forget, there's another author who's just about as big, and he's also a Christian horror writer. Of course, the stories are not, like Christian stories necessarily. They just have it's all thematic. If you believe in Christ or the Bible to someone, you might recognize some of the themes, but you don't have to. And it's still equally a terrifying story. But I do remember,
I might have to give that a try. That's interesting.
You might. Yeah, you should check out Ted Dekker. I mean, everybody agrees he's an amazing writer. I've not read much Ted Dekker, but my brother did. My mom did. I started to read a Ted Dekker book once and was like, no,
can't. Not for me.
No, I was a child. So maybe I need to try and pick it up again. But he's like won awards and stuff. Like he is considered very, very good. So you can do a lot with horror. Yeah.
I'm thinking too, I mentioned it, I don't even remember how long ago it was. Fantastic Land by, is it Mike Bachoven?
Oh, that's right.
It's like it's not dystopia, but it's like Lord of the Flies in an amusement park kind of a story, but it is very horror-esque. So it doesn't necessarily fall into a fantasy category of horror, because it's all about like, hey, humans will kill each other if they get the chance, and that's horrifying. So,
Yeah. Lord of the Flies is a book I felt like had a lot of horror elements. I mean,
well, especially with like it's almost kind of magical realism too, because you have the beast and you're like, is he really hearing voices or is he insane?
It is firmly speculative fiction because it is, I would say it is a horror story with elements of magical realism. And it's almost an alternate history story because it takes place in the past. But I mean, when it was written, was it in the same? It was in the time period it was written, though, right? Wasn't it?
I think it was a couple decades removed. I think it was.
So maybe it was
written in like the 60s, right?
Okay, so it was an alternate.
I'm not great with dates.
Yeah. So it was still technically an alternate history.
Yeah. And like really alternate history can be like taking place in the past or taking place in modern day with this change in the past. So I mean, even if it was written at the time, it could still kind of be considered that.
Yeah, that's true. So that one is definitely, that one straddles multiple genres in the speculative world. So I think I would just like that's kind of an example where like if I was going to query that, I think I would query it as speculative fiction with elements of horror and magical realism. Like I couldn't just say it's a horror book or it's magical real. It's because it's not just one or the other. It's also a psychological
thriller. I wonder
how
Fantastic Land was queried. I don't know. I wonder how Fantastic Land was
thriller,
queried.
maybe.
I guess, but it's like it's so like Hunger Games-esque. You feel like you'd want some kind of element
like
of
dystopian.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I just would be interested in
a
seeing
psychological thriller with dystopian elements.
Yeah.
That's obviously I just throw in the elements occasionally.
You can just like mix and match the speculative fiction categories. So it's kind of great, but also very difficult to know how specific to get. So
yeah, exactly. And you never know if an agent's going to be pleased or not. But that's always true.
Yeah, true. So the next category is steampunk, which I hesitated making its own category. Do you think this counts as sci-fi? Or
I have
alternate
seen
history?
I have seen it done as sci-fi. I've seen it done as fantasy, and I've seen it as an alternate history. Well, it is usually also an alternate history, but not always.
Because it usually comes earlier in time, or it postpones the next wave of technology.
Yeah. And it's usually an alternate history, but not necessarily. I read a series that was steampunk, one of the only steampunk series I really like, and I can't remember the name of it. It's Agatha something. Agatha something, like some like series of adventures basically. And it's in a different world completely. So it's not a alternate history because it's in a different world.
It's non-magical fantasy.
Yeah, it's non-magical fantasy. It might be magical. There might be magic in it too, actually. I don't remember. But yeah, that one's hard because it can be whatever you want it to be. It could be sci-fi, it could be fantasy, or it could be alternate history, or it could be all three of them, which I feel like is actually often done. Yeah. That one's a weird
I'm never really sure how to define it either, because like gears and steam come to mind, but is that the Industrial Revolution or before that? Is it industrial?
Yeah, I believe so.
I know what it means, but I can't define it for you. You know what I mean? It's to be just super weird. It's kind of like that quote about porn. Like I can't give you a definition, but I know it when I see it.
Yep. That's hilarious.
That's how I feel about steampunk. So
I think that's how a lot of people do, because also, yes, if you were thinking like historically accurately, then I think steampunk stuff would coincide with the Industrial Revolution to some extent.
Yeah.
But it's become so far removed from just that you can kind of do it whenever. You could do it in like Roman times and make it like a part of like, you know, like the inventions of Rome, or like, you know, in Venice during the Renaissance with all like the technological advancements, you know. It definitely has come really far from where it started. Yeah, steampunk can be just about anything. That one's a weird one to query too.
I do notice it a lot in indie because I think it's a category on Amazon and that kind of stuff, but it's not a category within like a query letter. So
no, you would typically, I still think, unless it revolves super, super, super heavily on the whole steampunk thing, like that Agatha's whatever, I gotta look it up again. I mean, it's just heavily steampunk. The cover image, the whole everything about it is super steampunk. That's a book I might query as steampunk because it is the whole identity of the book and every thread of the book story. But otherwise, unless you are just like the whole everything about this book is steampunk, I feel like you would query it ideally as science fiction or fantasy or alternate history if there's no elements of science fiction or fantasy other than you know, that there's steampunk stuff. You could then query it as alternate history, but otherwise I think most people would think it's science fiction or fantasy, and you would just make it clear in your query that it involves, you know, steampunk elements. I wouldn't say
I usually assume sci-fi just because I associate it with the Industrial Revolution and like real things like gears and aviation and these types of things.
And it usually is sci-fi. But then there's stuff like the Clockwork Princess, where for a tiny bit of a spoiler, Clarissa's like angel locket is a piece of clockwork technology, which is very steampunk, made with like with gears and stuff, but it's also magical. So we have both. That one is God, that one is kind of all the genres.
All of the things.
Yeah, it really did cross all the genres. And she did it marvelously.
Yes, it does work. So, but that one does, it has like the little automatons, is that what they're called? Which is a steampunk thing, but like they're magically controlled. So it can be
automatons. And if you guys want some fun inspiration if you're writing a steampunk story, I was very embarrassingly for like a good like 3 months of my life in high school really into this band called Steam Powered Giraffe.
I remember them. You introduced me to them in college.
Yes, I've introduced people to them occasionally. They're very talented. It is a little, yes, yeah, I love that song. There's a couple songs that I still really like by them that are just all around good. But the whole concept is a little like, wow. But I had theater friends who were really into them in high school because this is such a theater kid thing that they would be into. But Steam Powered Giraffe is a band. They dress up like automatons in the steam, like in a steam powered world, and they do like the full like makeup and stuff, and they perform as if they are automatons. And and but they have beautiful voices. The music's beautiful, but a lot of their songs are also about steam powered stuff. Like I think that one song, the Honeybee song, which I think is beautiful, I'm pretty sure is one of the characters in the band singing a love song to a toaster. Now, if you didn't know that, then you just hear it and you go, what a sweet, beautiful song, which is why I love it. But if you know the context, you're like, what the hell?
Like, this is totally not what you would think.
No. So some songs from them are very directly about like being like steampunk. And some of them are not. But if you guys are writing something steampunk, I can happily, firmly say that is not my strength in any way, shape, or form. But I highly recommend Steam Powered Draft for your inspiration. I have not ever written anything steampunk. There is no part of me that feels that I could write something steampunk. I just does not seem like my genre at all.
I feel like my suspension of disbelief for that one is just, I have a high bar for it because I do have like real world associations.
Yes,
so
I do too, which could also be why the genre never exploded the way that I think people thought it would. It had like a little brief explosion, but I think people thought this is going to be like the new YA genre, and it really kind of faded. And I feel like maybe that's why.
It's true.
And also some people wanted it to be more sci-fi. Some people wanted it to be more fantasy. It's
hard to hit the right balance. It straddles
so many genres. And the suspension of disbelief for all those genres is very different too. So yeah, that was a hard one. That's a weird genre.
Oh, it is. Also, just like briefly, when so Steam Powered Giraffe is inspiration for steampunk. If you're looking for sci-fi inspiration, there's this band Starset that I really love, and they're like a very sci-fi driven kind of, like they talk about space and like technology and this kind of stuff, and there's like love songs in it and all this kind of stuff. But Starset is a really great like background soundtrack for writing sci-fi.
I love that.
I really love them. So
that's
just
excellent.
If anyone's looking for that, because sci-fi has not exploded. Oh, good. Sci-fi is not like as big as I think it's going to be soon. So if you have sci-fi ideas, work on them, because I bet there's going to be a wave coming. And if you need inspiration, I just love it when bands kind of pick a niche like that and just own it. So good for Steam Powered Giraffe, good for Starset.
Yes, fully agree. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so I have two more. These are also kind of strange sub genres, but I wanted to mention them because I think they're a little different. So the next one is superhero fiction. Obviously Ash loves this one. You got Marvel and DC as the main ones. Renegades is also involved in here.
Yes,
the thing about superhero is that I associate it with fantasy, but it is also sometimes sci-fi. And it's also sometimes like, I don't know what the Black Widow would be considered, but she doesn't have like a superpower. She just has like assassin training, right?
Yeah. Well, so they give her some like weapons that are sci-fi, but no, she could absolutely just be. Yeah. I mean, hers is almost like her whole story is actually more of an alternate history story. It's like, what if the Russians did this? Yeah. You know, and had this like whole secret operation, and maybe they do, you know, but right. Which is, the alternate history.
Weird thought now. Is Stranger Things alternate history?
Yes.
Interesting.
It's actually based on the some crazy experiments that they were actually doing near that town. So 100%, yeah. I think it's both alternate history, magical realism, and horror.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well that's cool. I never thought of it that way before. But anyway, back to superhero fiction. So I don't know the scene for this is so dominated by Marvel that I don't actually know
Michael Bay
how big this genre is.
This genre was a lot bigger when I was like in middle school and high school. Yeah. It's definitely faded since then, because we had Michael Bay. Percy Jackson was not necessarily a superhero book, but it did follow a lot of the same kind of like tropes that a lot of the superhero books did. A lot of the superhero fiction is about, like, it starts with middle schoolers typically. Like Michael Bay did that. There's a whole series. Yeah, it's superhero fiction is very strange because I love Marvel movies and the cinematic universe. And I even like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is a little bit cringy for the first couple seasons. Superhero books have to like really hit a sweet spot because, again, it's the suspension of disbelief thing. It's very hard to hit the sweet spot of suspension of disbelief. I do think there is a Black Widow series of books written by, I'm gonna get the author wrong.
Is it like a YA author?
Yeah, it's a big YA author. You guys would recognize.
Okay.
I don't want to get her name
wrong. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And those are actually really good. And of course they had to be because there was a lot of scrutiny on them. But those were actually really good. The Michael Bay series was really good. A lot of those series that focus on like kids with special powers, I think those also count, which are very popular books. They don't necessarily bill them or like market them as superhero books, but they essentially are, like kids with like unique abilities. As long as it's not like magical based. Like if it's something that they're born with and it's not magic, then it's
something they develop to a certain degree. Because so I'm thinking about Scott Westerfeld's Zeros.
Yes.
Which they have like the inconvenient superhero power kind of thing, which is cool. And Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson, which I would recommend. Is also really good. It's a trilogy. It's pretty good. If you like Renegades and you liked Zeros, I think you would like Steelheart. But it's it's like developed abilities to a certain degree. So I guess maybe that's the difference between superhero and just like straight fantasy, where there's some kind of development outside the norm that causes them to have those abilities.
Yeah, I think typically there is, and there's like some level of training that goes on. That's true with like magical like fantasy powers too, typically.
And maybe like a little more associated with good, like hero versus villains, like good versus evil, and
there's
more
often
dichotomy.
like a team dynamic. There's usually like multiple in books, at least there's typically more superheroes like working together or good forces working together. But it is typically a very like good against evil struggle. Yes, there's like a big bad villain.
It has its own tropes for sure. So
it does.
I want to qualify it as a fantasy subgenre, but it's not always, because isn't the whole like a science experiment gone wrong or something? And
so is Spider-Man. I mean, it could be either fantasy or sci-fi. It just completely depends. Doctor Strange, I think, is fantasy, because his powers are just way more like magical, like spiritually type powers. And then a lot of them are born with their powers, like X-Men, although some of them in X-Men are also the results of scientific experiments. So it could be.
I'm not gonna lie, this is probably my biggest barrier to the Marvel universe, because I feel like it's so many things that it's almost overwhelming. I'm like, you can't have the Hulk and Thor and like not Superman, I don't know, Tony Stark, and then like the magical people all in the same universe.
Why not?
I don't know. I know
you do have to be willing to embrace chaos with the Marvel universe. If you can't embrace chaos, you will not. Which is probably why a lot of people do prefer DC, is because logically it does make more sense logistically, and I understand that. But I don't care. I still prefer Marvel. I think their storytelling is better. I think they're more dynamic.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And see, I probably prefer DC because the world just makes more sense to me.
That's absolutely does.
That's the difference between me and Ash right there.
I'm like, bring on the chaos.
I'm like, I need this to make sense.
Make it make sense.
Yeah.
Marvel's like, no, we won't. We'll actively make it not make sense even more.
Yeah. Oh, you want it to make sense? Here's this totally new element that makes even less.
And I'm like, give it to me, give it all.
More.
Yeah, it's true. This is another thing you and Javi have very much in common.
Is he a DC person?
Oh yeah. Not a Marvel. He hates Marvel. Cool. And I think that's kind of why.
Yet again, Javi and I have weird things in common. So I think that's it. I think you can tell a lot about someone based on whether or not they prefer DC or Marvel.
Oh, absolutely. Like people who like Marvel like to have fun,
Oh, wow. I tried to come up with a zinger the other way, but I can't because
it's hard.
I don't
There's
actually
a
know
little
a lot.
element of truth to that, okay? Because y'all people who like DC are like, give me the tragic origin stories. This kid better have no living parents. I want trauma.
I own that. Absolutely. That's definitely what I prefer. So
you guys are better at catharsis, probably experiencing catharsis in a healthy way. A lot of us over at Marvel, I think, are here for the escape with no catharsis, and we don't want to improve on ourselves.
We're here for the good time, and DC people are here for a real time.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. 100%. Yes. Yeah.
All right, good to know. Now take that into the world, listeners.
Yeah, there you go. We've nailed it if you've ever wondered what the difference was.
Everything makes sense now. Okay, so the last category I have is apocalyptic fiction. And this is kind of dystopian, but apocalyptic really deals more with like the end of the world as we know it kind of thing. So I feel like zombie stories are apocalyptic.
100%.
I feel like anything
plague type stories.
Yes. Anything revolving around Revelation or like any kind of, like that.
Yeah,
or even
that series that's
Left Behind.
Yep, the Left Behind series. Yep.
And what is it? Norse mythology with Ragnarok?
Yes, Ragnarok.
Anything along those lines, I would call apocalyptic.
Dystopian
the knife of never letting go
after apocalyptic. If you're wondering if your story is dystopian or apocalyptic, because some people get them mixed up, and if you're wondering, you have to ask yourself: is the world still actively ending in this story?
Yeah.
If it is,
or is it post-ended?
Yeah, if it's post-ended, if we've like post-ended, like not even, and even so, apocalyptic is where in the middle of the world is ending. Post-apocalyptic is the world has been ending for a while now, and then dystopian is the world has ended, we've moved on, we've built some new version of society to some degree. Dystopian. Yeah. So
that is a really good clarifying thing. So knife of never letting go would be dystopian then. But now I'm trying to think if I have any specific examples of apocalyptic.
I don't read apocalyptic fiction. It stresses me out.
Yeah, what was that? It kind of does.
Javi's over here making just incredibly rude gestures at me and calling me names because I don't like apocalyptic fiction.
Wow, I guess he does. Is that what
he does? Saying? Well, he likes everything that's depressing.
I see.
Like DC, you know.
I'm with that.
There you go. That's why I like you.
Fair.
Yeah. I was like 13-year-old goth music, like, and what about it?
Yeah, and
oh god.
Yeah, so I can't think of any good examples.
Isn't I Am Legend? That's a movie.
Yes.
I think this is often more of a movie because the aesthetic for apocalyptic. Yeah, that's right. That one is too. But the aesthetic, just like the aesthetic is really important for magical realism, its antithesis, but equally important aesthetic is the apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic aesthetic. Dystopian, you can pick whatever aesthetic you want. There's a very specific aesthetic that people expect from apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction. Typically, there's kind of like a wasteland situation. Things are kind of like barren looking. Buildings are destroyed to some degree.
Angel Fall, is that what it's called? I'm gonna forget the author. But it's like so it's like angels have attacked the earth and everything is in chaos. I think it's called Angel Fall. That's my example of apocalyptic.
That sounds
apocalyptic.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of examples of this because I don't read this genre a lot, but pretty much every zombie thing ever is any zombie movie, zombie show usually is apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. This is a massive genre in video games. Massive. I think every other game Javi plays is an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic game. And it's often either zombies or some kind of twist on zombies, like mold spores that people inhale that make them crazy, or some disease that's taken over. But you could also go more natural and do like a natural disaster or make it supernatural where, you know, like the angel fall thing sounds supernatural. So you could do a science fiction element to it. Like it's like a, you know, plague or something or some technology that's wiped out the earth. Or you can make it fantasy like the angels thing. You could make it completely natural and like, you know, there's some new disease or some, oh, that scared the crap out of me. I just looked over at my door.
Is it an apocalypse?
Yeah, I looked, honestly, for a second, it looked like the apocalypse. He's just got the door cracked open. He's got this little rubber like spiky chick toy that made our niece cry on Easter. And it flashes red and blue like police lights. And he just stuck it through the door. And because it's like this weird spiky rubber, I couldn't even tell that it was the chick at first. I was just like, what is coming through my door? Like, am I about to be abducted by aliens? Good Lord. Anyways, not even
aliens invading could also be apocalyptic.
Yeah, and that would be a sci-fi version of it. But yeah, I think there's typically sci-fi, supernatural, sci-fi, fantasy, or I got distracted because Javi just walked in with a stupid little toy. Or a natural. It could be a natural end of the world thing too. I actually think those are more frightening.
Yeah, they're too realistic.
There's you can probably see the light.
I can see the little lights.
Yes, he's holding it in front of the camera so you guys can see. It's a weird looking like little rubber chick, and my mom was so excited to give it to Grayson, our little almost 2-year-old niece, for Easter. And Grayson has this thing. This is totally divergence, but I'm going to say it anyways. For some reason, this child, it gets frightened of very strange things for no reason at all. And then like she'll like face plant really hard and not cry. So, you know, she's just unexpected about some things. But like, for example, I gave her for Christmas, I gave her a book with googly eyes on it that were on like a little pig face. And she unwrapped it, screamed no, threw the book and burst into tears and threw herself into my mom's arms because she was afraid. And I was just like, no idea what about this scared her so bad. And you never know what it's going to be with her. And and my mom was so excited to give her this little chick on Easter. And I said, LOL, I wonder if she's going to react badly because you never know. And she did. And it was so funny.
Oh my gosh. Grayson.
I don't know why she does that.
Silly.
It's so weird. Yeah. Anyways, apparently she's afraid of birds too. I'm like, this is stuff I know for a fact you have no experience with. Yeah, but why? Like, what was the inciting incident?
Has she been attacked by a goose?
She's not been alive long enough to be attacked by a goose. Where's this coming from, kid?
Interesting.
It kills me. Yeah. Anyways, that was a divergence, but that's where that little chick toy came from. It's still here because it didn't go home with her because she's scared of it.
Of course.
God.
But yeah, that's all the genres I had. Do you have any subgenres that you wanted to talk about?
I do not. I think you pretty much nailed them.
Thank you. I think mostly like a lot of these can combine. So, you know, I don't know, keep marketing in mind a little bit when you're coming up with ideas. I would advise to have some kind of a broad category, not speculative fiction, but broad as in like fantasy or sci-fi. And then if you want some elements that, you know, leach into the other subgenres, that's fine. Just like Ash says, always say like with elements of to a certain degree. So but I think all these are great. I mean, I'm not a big fan of like superhero as much, but otherwise I think they're all great. And that's just a personal thing.
Fair.
So
that one's really hard to accomplish.
And I think too, like speculative fiction is interesting because I feel like most writers that write any of these genres, we have a lot in common with each other because there is just like this, I don't know what else to call it, just this speculative element to the way that we write, whereas like people that write contemporary probably have a lot in common, even if they're writing like lighthearted versus really issue driven or you know, like historical, probably have those kinds of writers have a lot in common, and all writers have a lot in common because we're all insane. But other than that, just like more of the specifics, I feel like if you're looking for like feedback on your fantasy book, a sci-fi author is still going to be able to do that really well, and vice versa and that kind of stuff. So I just feel like speculative fiction is a good umbrella term for us to understand so that we all kind of know like we're kind of in the same category, but we don't want to like pin that category down too much. I guess is what I intended to say. So
I totally agree. I think you nailed it.
Cool, thanks.
Do you have any writing updates for people?
I've kind of just been like testing out a few things to see what I want to write next.
I get that. I've kind of been doing that.
I want to have something to work on. I don't want to say that I've been bored, but there are like moments where I'm sitting down and I'm like, gosh, I wish I was in the middle of a writing project. And you can't just like start it. I mean, I guess I could, but it would not be great. It would make more work for me in the long run. And I have a couple ideas that I'm kind of playing with. So I don't know, experimenting, seeing what's going to happen. But and then I sent out a couple other queries today. Most of them were long shots. but I was like, hey, I might as well try. And then there was one that I was like, oh no, I really like this person. I really hope that she wants my book.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've been getting rejections kind of trickling in over the past couple days.
Same.
Which is, the typical fun spiel on that. But I still have a lot out there. And so I'm like, okay, it's comforting when you get a rejection if you have a ton of others out there. So every time I get like a batch of queries back that are rejections, I'm like, okay, if I send out more, then this time in a couple months when I get the rejections for the other ones back, I'll have these out there in the world, and then I won't have to get depressed. So
I feel that.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's what I've been doing.
Cool.
What about you?
I'm still in much the same place. I'm still trying to finish my reading binge that I've been on, but I'm also toying with like 3 different book ideas right now. I still have my like big, magnum opus book idea, but I know I'm going to have to like pour loads of energy into that. So I'm like not 100% sure that that's what I want to do right now. I'm almost thinking I might finish this sci-fi book that's like half written and completely plotted out. So I'm like, I could finish that next, but I also had this dream the other night that'd be a really good idea. So I'm kind of in the same spot where I'm just like reading and then just brainstorming on these books to figure out which one is worth working on for now. And I think last week I told you guys that I got 2 requests for a partial and a full manuscript. I did get rejected by my dream agent, so sad. But the other one is still out. It's the request for the full that's still out. So, fingers crossed. That's still exciting, and I'm still sending queries. So that's kind of where I'm at with my writing update.
Yep.
Yeah.
I hate rejections like that. I'm so sorry. It's like a gut punch.
Okay.
You're like, okay, well, there go my dreams.
Exactly. I was like,
but
you were the perfect agent. It's fine.
I know. Why can't you see how good I am at this? Just kidding.
Yeah, it's true.
It's
exactly.
so subjective.
Anything else though that you want to share with the peeps?
Nope.
Okay, sweet. Well, if you guys liked this episode, or if you hated this episode but loved our beautiful voices, if you guys wouldn't mind leaving us 5 stars below, that would be amazing. If you guys want us to do something different, or there's a topic that you want us to talk about specifically on here, we're super happy to do that. Just reach out to us. We are on social media. You guys can contact us on Instagram and TikTok at the Scripturient Society, and also follow us on there. Lots of fun content. You can also email us at contact@storysirenstudio.com. That's our production company if you want to send us a longer message, or join our writing group on Discord. The link is in the episode description below. I think that's everything we've got for you guys. So until next week, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.